Sunday night. This was just after 10 p.m. where Vancouver police officers responded to a stabbing. This was near a bus stop outside a McDonald's restaurant at East Hastings and Cassiar Street. Our officers located the suspect at that location, who was later identified as a 22-year-old Surrey man. He was near the bus stop, and the officers attempted to arrest the suspect at gunpoint. The suspect was uncooperative, and our officers were able to safely arrest him using a taser and by pulling him to the ground. A knife was recovered at the scene, and the suspect was treated at hospital for a cut to his hand, which officers believe may have occurred by himself, due to his own self, and also happened prior to the arrival of the officers. The victim, a 22-year-old Langley man, was transported to hospital with non-life-threatening stab wounds. The suspect remains in custody, and officers are recommending a charge for assault with a weapon. The suspect has been identified and charged with one count of assault with a weapon, is identified as Jani Wan. The victim and the suspect in this case did not appear to know each other prior to this incident, and they were amongst a crowd of people who had recently exited a nearby music festival. The incident, from what we gathered, started off as a verbal dispute and is believed to be isolated. Sometimes force doesn't look pretty, and in this particular case, what people are referring to is a very small part of a bigger incident. There was a lot of things that played out prior to this, and in this case, it is alleged that the suspect that was being arrested on film and on several cell phone cameras had allegedly stabbed somebody else during a recent altercation, and from our officers' knowledge, may or may not still be in possession of a weapon, of a knife. The officers started out by giving the suspect verbal commands and asking him to surrender so they could arrest him, and they had their guns out at that time. He was uncooperative. The officers there had to act quickly. It was a very dynamic situation. They did deploy a taser, and they did pull him to the ground by his backpack and were able to safely arrest him. And you know, this situation, when you look at the amount of bystanders that were around him, the officers had to act very quickly for the safety of the other bystanders, for the safety of the officers, and that's what people saw. In today's day and age, we expect that. There are people with cell phone videos out. A lot of times these do help us in our investigation. You know, our advice is to not rush to conclusions, not rush to judgment. Share the video, even with us, because it could be very helpful in investigation. It could help us later on down the road, but you know, this isn't new to us. It can be frustrating at times, and I think it's very helpful when you get the full story as to exactly what happened, what our officers were doing, and they did have to act quickly in this particular case. And this was a violent situation with a crowd, very dynamic and a very fluid situation. So the officers arrested this person, and he remains in custody.